It starts like a movie. NASA hacked. The Pentagon breached. Sensitive systems exposed. But this wasn't a spy, a rogue state, or a cyber-criminal syndicate. It was a boy in South Florida, 15 years old, alone at his computer. He called himself Comrade. To him, it was curiosity. To the government, it was a threat. Tonight, we follow the life of Jonathan James, a brilliant, restless mind pushed to the edge, and the chain of events that turned a prodigy into a tragedy. This is today's bold chapter. Every life is a story, but some are unbelievable. This is Bold Chapter. Chapter 1. The Machine and the Boy. Jonathan James is 6, and the family computer becomes his world. While other kids play outside, he dives into code, stripping Windows from a home PC and installing Linux just because he can. His father, a programmer, watches with worry as parental locks fall in minutes under Jonathan's fingers. By his early teens, he's not a kid with a hobby. He's a self-taught programmer reading C and Unix manuals late into the night. Computers are how he understands the world. Systems, logic, weaknesses. Every vulnerability is a puzzle to be solved. The machine gives him control he lacks elsewhere. Family fights, confiscated hardware, and teenage rebellion follow, but none of it stops him returning to the glow of the screen. Chapter 2. Online alias Comrade. Teenage forums and early internet chat rooms give him a new identity, Comrade. The nickname lets him move through a community that prizes skill and secrecy. For Jonathan, hacking isn't about money or fame. It's the intellectual rush of outsmarting a system. He probes, learns, and sometimes warns. He sends polite emails to administrators explaining holes he found. That nuance is important. His actions are a mix of mischief, curiosity, and a compulsion to prove what he can do. Yet the systems he explores belong to institutions that measure risk differently than curious kids do. Chapter 3. Crawling into NASA. In the summer of 1999, he seeks a new challenge: NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Jonathan finds a way into 13 computers and downloads proprietary software, code the agency values at $1.7 million. The files he accesses include programs used to manage the International Space Station's environmental controls. He later downplays it. He wanted to study the code. It was, in his words, crappy and not worth what they claimed. But the consequence isn't his judgment, it's the reaction. NASA shuts systems down for weeks to investigate, incurs tens of thousands of dollars in cost, and suddenly a teenager's curiosity becomes a national problem. Hey, you're here for bold stories, and we've got plenty more coming. Smash that like button, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and drop a comment to tell us what hit you hardest in this episode. And if you want to ride with us all the way to the top, subscribe right now. Let's make this the fastest growing channel of 2025. It's a community, and you're part of it. Chapter 4. Crossing the Line. Pentagon Access. 2 months later, Jonathan pushes further. He gains access to a server tied to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, an organization that tracks chemical, biological, and nuclear threats. Inside, he intercepts thousands of internal messages and captures usernames and passwords, some linked to military-level access. For him, it's another technical conquest. For investigators, it's potentially catastrophic. The scene shifts. The narrative of a kid at a keyboard becomes one of national security. The stakes change overnight, and with them, how every authority will respond. Chapter 5. The Raid and the First Fall. Early one morning, the FBI is at the door. Agent sees computers, drives, a Palm Pilot, even a Star Trek book. He cooperates, admits what he did, promises never to do it again, and then silence. Months later, prosecution follows. The court treats him as the youngest convicted cyber offender at the time. The consequences include house arrest, strict limits on computer use, mandatory apologies to federal agencies, and later, due to probation violations, time in juvenile detention. The punishment fractures his relationship with the thing he loved most. Hacking, once a source of joy and identity, becomes the instrument of his downfall. Chapter 6. The Wider Web, Gonzales and Shadow Crew. The hacker world Jonathan lived in is not isolated. Albert Gonzales, another self-taught hacker who also breached NASA as a teen, moves into a darker arena, working with Shadow Crew, a marketplace for stolen credit card and identity data. Gonzales becomes both informant and perpetrator, and the network of hackers complicates every investigation. Years later, Gonzales is linked to the largest identity theft conspiracies of the era, tens of millions of victims, and hundreds of millions in damages. The web of association among young hackers means suspicion can travel quickly, and innocence becomes hard to prove when investigators are chasing much bigger crimes. Chapter 7. The Last Raid and a Tragic End. May 2008, Jonathan lives quietly, withdrawn and battling depression. His mother had died years earlier. He's out of the hacking scene. Then agents return, this time the Secret Service. They search his home. They find a suicide note from earlier years and a gun. The investigation's glare is terrifying. Jonathan believes he will be scapegoated, convinced that larger players, informants, and investigators will pin blame where it serves their case. 2 weeks after the raid, he is found dead by suicide. In his final words, he wrote that he had no faith in the justice system, that imprisonment for crimes he may not have committed was not winning, and that death was his way to reclaim control. He dies convinced he was doomed, whether or not the case against him would have stuck. Another chapter closed, but the story is far from over. Subscribe to Bold Chapter and never miss what's next. Jonathan James was not a mastermind criminal. He was a gifted, troubled young man whose curiosity ran deeper than the systems he probed. He sometimes emailed fixes. He sometimes crossed lines. The institutions that encountered him responded with law enforcement, not mentorship, with suspicion, not guidance. The result was a life broken into pieces. His story asks a difficult question. What do we do with dangerous talent? Do we criminalize youthful curiosity, or do we find ways to channel it toward creation instead of destruction? Jonathan's life is a cautionary tale about the human cost when institutions choose punishment over rehabilitation, when a potential innovator is treated exclusively as a threat. If this story moved you, subscribe for more Bold Chapters. Stories about the people who shaped history, sometimes by accident, sometimes by courage, and sometimes by tragedy. This was today's Bold Chapter.